All right. Happy day, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to episode 157 of the On Air Advocate. We're at the On Air Advocate. We look to provide education, support, and empowerment for all of those with different abilities, mental and medical illnesses, and their caregivers. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Tammy Flynn, and I am the host and producer of the On Air Advocate. And I am super excited if you are joining us here this early Friday morning, or whether you're catching this on the replay. Now, as always, if you think any of the content that we're talking about today could be relevant for anyone in your network or your circle, please hit the share button and share the love with others. Now, as you guys know, for the whole entire month of November, we are celebrating caregivers for National Family Caregivers Month and bringing stories to you. And so I am so excited to have here today with us Jessica Ceisel. She is a mother, a caregiver, and a parent advocate. Welcome, Jessica.
Thanks for having me.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us this early in the morning on a Friday. So I so appreciate that as we get rolling for our day. And, you know, we were introduced to each other by other parents that are also traveling that caregiver journey. And yours is such an extraordinary one that has some different layers to it that not all caregivers have in their medical journey with their kiddos and whatnot. And so I would like you to just, from the very beginning, kind of start where your caregiver journey began.
So our caregiver journey has really been a journey. Journey is kind of the word that we use in our family quite a bit. So when my daughter was born, she was just a fussy baby, but everybody was like, she's fine, she's fine, she's fine. Mm-hmm. As she got older, we started to realize that there's something wasn't quite right. I started knocking down the doors with the doctors, and everybody's like, no, she's okay. At 3 years old, she weighed 27 pounds, and she was losing weight. And so it was a pretty rapid kind of function that was happening with her. And if you think about it, you're not allowed to turn the car seat around until your child is 30 pounds, right? So a lot of newborns are 30 pounds at about a year old. So she's 3 at the time. And so that's when our journey really started. So at that point, she got diagnosed with Celiac Disease. And when she went to a gluten-free diet, she was supposed to start growing and gaining weight, but she didn't. And so we started to get some second opinions. We were told, hey, maybe we're not feeding her gluten-free. But me as a mom, I knew I was doing everything I could. I had gotten all new pots and pans. I had wiped out my house. My entire house was gluten-free. She was just continuing to get sick. She had a lot of GI symptoms. Her arms and legs were going numb. She had migraines. She's only 3. Right. So at that point, we went and got a second opinion. We found out she had a fructose malabsorption. And within 6 months, she gained 15 pounds and grew 3 inches. So it was a huge success. And we kind of thought, okay, we're in the clear now, right? Mm-hmm. But a lot of things started to come to light now that we had gotten the failure to thrive under control. We started noticing her breathing wasn't always right. So they had been treating her for acid reflux. But it became clear it wasn't acid reflux. It was her lungs that were hurting her. And she'd get low-grade fevers all the time. And so our journey really kind of took off there. We started exploring some asthma diagnosis. We started exploring a whole bunch of different things and some sinus surgeries, and our search took us, we live in the Chicagoland area, and so we have a great medical team. Fantastic. And we had lots of hospitals to choose from. We got to go to a lot of them, and people just didn't know what to do with us. And so they treated everything as an acute problem, and nobody was really taking seriously how severe her symptoms were.
Or ownership, like we need to figure this puzzle out.
Yes, and the most frustrating thing for me as a mom was the pulmonologist just wanted to look at pulmonary, and ENT just wanted to look at the nose, and the GI just wanted to look at the stomach. But we're whole people. We're not just segments, and everything relates to each other.
So there wasn't that team approach going on at that time.
It wasn't.
And do you feel like, because at that point, how old was she?
So I'd say when like the turning curve happened, she was about 5, when I was just kind of done exploring on my own. I needed that umbrella diagnosis, or at least that umbrella viewpoint where somebody could look at her as a whole. And
Right.
so that's,
Oh, and I'm
go
sorry
ahead.
for interrupting. At that point, did you feel like when she was 5, you had a good enough grip on things to really, be that mom at that point? You know how we talked about like we have all evolved to this point, to be like, we need continuity of care and we need a team approach? Or were you still in that process where you were listening to the doctors like, okay, well, he's saying it's this and not really feeling like you had the ownership, or the right to be like, hey, we need to wrangle everybody together?
Yeah, so patience is not a virtue of mine. And by that time I was getting frustrated, and I was getting upset that nobody was listening to me. And like you said, it was an evolution. I had to find my own voice as a parent. And I had to figure out that it was okay to stand up and say, I get that that's what you think as a doctor, but I'm the one who knows my child. And so we need to work together as a team. So instead of listening to the doctors around 5, I started saying, let's work together. And I think that is where one of our biggest turning points happened.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, a lot of that was I found my voice.
Right. And at that point, when did she get that diagnosis of it's PCD, right?
PCD, yeah, Primary Ciliary Dyskinesia, which is a rare genetic disease. So she did not get the diagnosis until about 2 years ago. So she was 7, but from that age 5 to 7, we made a lot of progress in just treating at least her symptoms and getting everything managed and under control. We traveled across several states. We ended up at the Mayo Clinic, which they did an amazing job at looking at her at that whole picture. So we traveled there twice, once when she was just turned 6 and once when she was 7. So each January we went, and that's where we got the diagnosis, was the second time that we went up there.
Now, her other conditions, because I know that you had listed some of those other things that she has going on. She has the cyclic vomiting, right? When were those diagnosed in between there, or are those things that have kind of just evolved out of all of this?
So it's all been an evolution. So she was just diagnosed with cyclic vomiting this summer, but it's because when we went to the Mayo Clinic that first time, she was having migraines and she was having unexplained stomach pains that didn't go with the celiac or anything associated with that. And so they had put her on a medication that had actually treated the cyclic vomiting syndrome. But as most medically complex situations are, the medicines often mess with their brains. And so over this past summer, I took her off of it because I just wanted to see what she would be like without it. And that's when the cyclic vomiting syndrome started. So, and for those of you who aren't aware of cyclic vomiting, for Makayla, when she starts vomiting, she vomits every 20 minutes for 14 hours until we can get it under control. So,
and do they usually cyclic vomiting, a lot of times, are they then admitted to the hospital during that time, or do parents kind of learn how to navigate that and be able to control it at home?
So there's cyclic vomiting's got a broad range of kiddos who experience the symptoms. There's some that are provoked by anxiety, and Makayla's are more by abdominal migraines rather than anxiety. For her, we now have a treatment plan where if we get to the point where she needs fluids to go to the hospital, we have a protocol up at Children's of Wisconsin where we can go to the infusion lab and they can just go ahead and hook her up. But we do also now have an arsenal of things that we can do at home. So I think it just depends on the kiddo and what happens with each one of them. It's really an individual basis.
And so at this point, she's 7 years old. She's 7?
So she's 8 currently, but
she just turned 8, right?
No, she's almost 9 actually. So,
Okay.
but so we've had the diagnosis of PCD, which was kind of our life-altering diagnosis for almost 2 years.
Okay. And so can you describe with a child, I don't know if you can get it in adulthood or not, living with PCD, what does that look like on a daily basis?
Yeah, so PCD is a rare genetic disease. It's often referred to as a lung disease. There's only about 3,000 people who have it in the United States, so there's not a lot of research being done, and there's only 8 PCD centers. So we're actually seen out of the Cystic Fibrosis Center,
Okay.
because the treatment of PCD and cystic fibrosis is very similar. So her diagnosis is a progressive disease, which is why we didn't see it as much when she was younger, and as she gets older, it becomes more clear.
Okay.
And we figured it out through genetic testing.
Okay. And then on a daily basis, what does that look like though? Like for treatments and, when people are thinking, okay, well, you have a rare disease, as a caregiver, what does that really look like?
Yeah, so she has treatments that she does. She does about 2 hours of treatments a day. She wears an oscillating chest vest. She does nebulizers. She does saline nose rinses. But because her disease is so rare, there's nobody we know who really has it. So it's not like you can go and talk to other people and say, hey, how are you handling this situation? So we actually have to mix a lot of the medications ourselves at home. So I'm now a pharmacist.
We put that on your title.
We have to order medications, and even the doctors, like currently we're fighting off an infection. So PCD causes a lot of respiratory and sinus infections. And so she's been fighting off an antibiotic resistant infection. And because there aren't other people who the doctors have seen in this situation, nobody really knows what to do with her. So as a mom and a caregiver, I'm doing a lot of the research on my own and trying to piece things together.
Right.
And, I'll reach out to like the online PCD community, which is another really small group. But there's a lot of good information on those, Facebook pages and stuff, because it's the only way that we can connect with one another.
Well, and I know when me and you connected, we had a great, first discussion, talking about that, because I'm obviously a full-time caregiver as well, the support that we need and the support that we seek out, within our networks, and finding out the information and not leaving no stone unturned. And as a parent, when you have rare disease, when your kiddos have rare disease, trying to be the leader in that, where those things aren't uncovered and they're not there. And so, we see sometimes all these networks out there and, oh, there's help and, for the caregiver, whatnot. But how is that for you when there isn't those resources as there is for some caregivers to reach out to, on a regular basis? I mean, it must be extremely frustrating.
It is. I have a wonderful family and support system. Family, friends, we have fantastic people who will support us, but nobody really understands it, right? So there is no PCD caregiver group or even group for my daughter to go to. And so it's frustrating because you want to try something new that you've thought about, but you don't have anybody to bounce the idea off of. So it's starting fresh every single time.
Right.
And because PCD is so rare, even the Facebook groups, everybody's kind of got gray areas of the same disease. There's no clear-cut treatments that are working. So it can be lonely sometimes, even though you're surrounded by people around you. And I think a lot of people might look at me sometimes like I'm crazy because I have to do things differently for my child, and people just don't understand it. So she's really susceptible to picking up an infection. So if you have a cold, she's going to get a respiratory infection. And so there's some isolation where we often have to pull back from social situations too and say, we can't come. And I don't know if everybody always understands that we're not just making excuses. We really can't jeopardize her health, right? Because then it kind of trickles all back towards, well, how do we get her better? Well, we don't know because we don't have anybody else to bounce that off of.
Right. And when something is rare, and as many know, last year, we had a whole rare disease series, which we kind of dive into that more, but because there's not as many young adults or people that have been diagnosed with it, there's not the research there, and there's not the research dollars there.
There's no funding, none. So there's currently little to no research on Makayla's disease at all, which is why we borrow all of our treatments from cystic fibrosis for PCD. But the causes of cystic fibrosis and the cause of PCD are very different. So the treatments help her maintain, but it doesn't help get to the root of the problem.
Right. It doesn't answer those questions. And so in my last series that I did in talking to so many, parents, and that would even be when we kind of veer off to those that have like the rarest of rare cancers in kids today and whatnot. I mean, I can't imagine being a parent and you feeling like, okay, no one knows this. I need to be flipping all these stones and trying to figure out what it is myself. But then on top of it, on a national level, there isn't any funding dollars for the doctors that need to find, some of those answers. You're looking at how can I treat every day at home? How can we live a healthy life the best that you can, but actually the reason you're not a scientist,
Nope.
there's not, you may get.
That's why I speak about Makayla, because maybe if one day we say something, the funding will somehow get there, right? We all need to kind of advocate. Being a rare disease family, we have to advocate for it. And like you and I talked about before,
right.
Not only is the funding not there for the research, the funding's not there for the treatment either. We have to fight and explain everything to the insurance companies because they don't want to pay for it either.
Right. So that whole financial end of it becomes enormous as well. And so for yourself, as being a caregiver, I know that we chatted a little bit about that before you became a full-time caregiver. You did have a full-time career at one time. And so how did that transition, or when did you make that decision? Like, hey, I'm not going back to work, or, what am I going to do at home now? When did that come for you?
It was kind of gradual and apparent. So I was a teacher, and my daughter this year, it's November, and she's now missed 18 days of school. So I can't take that much time off of work as a teacher. I mean, I can't leave somebody else's kiddos in a classroom. I tried doing some part-time stuff, and I was very fortunate to find something that I could just kind of go in a few days a week while she was in school. But it ended up just being too taxing where I was leaving because I'd get the phone calls from school saying, she's not doing well, or this doctor's appointment opened up and you have to get here right now, or you have to wait 6 months for it,
right.
or the therapies. And so it became apparent to us that this is where I need to be right now for our family. So.
Right. And when, I speak to so many caregivers, for yourself, from what I hear, you have a very amazing, supportive husband, right?
I do.
Within this. And so, when there's two parent households, a lot of times one parent ends up staying home and becoming the full-time family caregiver. Or if you're, helping out your parents, that same scenario, you end up leaving, your job and your career, staying home. But what if you don't have that other entity to help you and to support you financially for single parents and things that are out there? I mean, I feel like that's also such a struggle today for so many caregivers.
It is. That keeps me up in the middle of the night. Is what if something happens where we're not as fortunate as we are right now to be able to do this? I don't know how people can give it their all and they're trying to be pulled in all those different directions.
Right. There's so many layers to it. So I know that I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this question beforehand. Might not be ready, but I guess, I feel like, as we talked about, as a caregiver, I think you evolve, especially if your medical journey starts out when, your child, with a child and they're born and you have so many years. I feel like you're in that tornado kind of hurricane cycle for a few years where you're not fully equipped quite yet. But now looking at it, your daughter turning 9, right?
Yeah.
Turning 9. What would be maybe one or two things that would be your best advice to parents that are traveling this journey, whether it's the rare disease, journey with a child, or whether it is just that caregiver journey itself?
So I think that there's two things. So as a caregiver for your child, I think you need to trust your gut, because every time I haven't trusted my gut is when I regret it. And when I listen to my gut, it seems to lead us down the right path. And that's something that I struggled with at the beginning, because there's all these outside pressures, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to kind of black out all the other voices around you and just really go with what you believe.
Right.
I honestly don't believe that we would have a diagnosis if I didn't decide that, like, now's the time to trust my gut and I'm going to plow through. I think the second half of that too is you can't lose yourself in the caregiver journey too.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard because our days, all day, every day, oftentimes we're up every 4 hours doing treatments overnight. Like, it's hard to not get sucked into it.
Mm-hmm.
But when Makayla got diagnosed, we had to mourn the loss of the life that we had hoped for her and dream a new dream.
Yes.
And within the last few years, I learned I had to mourn the loss of the life I had hoped for myself and dream a new dream for myself and figure out, like, we're going to live in the moment today, and we're going to make today everything that it can be. And we're going to continue to dream, but it's just going to be a different dream. And it's not bad. It's just, but you have to have something for yourself. You cannot be a caregiver all the time. You have to find little bits, whether it's going out with your friends once in a while. I go to the gym, I go to boot camp in the morning, and that's like my hour where I can just focus on nothing, And
Yes.
So I think you have to find something for yourself, and it's okay to grieve without feeling guilty. It doesn't mean that you're giving up. It just means that you're changing paths.
Yes, definitely. That mourning process is something that has to take place. And sometimes that can be more than once. It can be at each different milestone and different, stages as they're working through the process, which I have found over the decades now, that, each milestone we hit, you go through that mourning process, even though now you're fully equipped, like you're fully armed, and you know what I'm saying? It's going to be different. You've accepted it, but it doesn't change the fact that, you still have emotions, and
you do.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that when I don't deal with them, they sneak up on me and they hit me when I'm least expecting it. I'll be watching somebody else's little girl dancing, and then I'll start crying thinking of my own, because I haven't dealt with it. So you have to give yourself that space to deal with it.
That patience and grace is what I always say. And a lot of patients at sitting at doctor's appointments, I'm always like, if you haven't gathered that yet, bring all your stuff with you and know that no matter where you go, it could be a long stay, no matter what.
Yes, we always have that emergency bag packed
with everything in it. So Jessica, if people want to find out more about the PCD, Foundation, how either they could get involved and help spread awareness or make a donation, where could they do that at?
So there is the PCB Foundation.org, I believe. I can post it in the comments below. And then the sweatshirt that I'm wearing is from Breathe PCD. And so it's a tribute on the lungs. Mm-hmm. So I can post that below too. And there are a couple of resources there.
Oh, nice. Okay. And then for yourself, I don't think that you have a public page, do you?
I do not. No.
You do not. So underneath, if people could, I think on Messenger, if there's another mom out there that's like, oh my gosh, I have a question, something that way, know that you can comment below this and I can take Jessica in it, and get the message back. So maybe you guys can share some information, because I'm certain that there might be other parents out there that over time are like, that kind of sounds like something that, my child is dealing with, or, I want to ask more questions. And so obviously there's the foundation to reach out to, but other moms that are dealing with rare disease. And for the rare disease community, I know there's some pretty cool, organizations that do some awesome things as well.
Yeah, so Harmony for Hope is one that I have partnered with in the past, and it's different rare disease patients and their caregivers who go and they speak to different groups of medical students as they're learning about their journey, and it's kind of interesting to get the insight from the patient side. And so Harmony for Hope's been great, and there are also a bunch of different rare disease platforms that I'm blanking on right now.
No, there is. I mean, if you just put in rare disease, there's like 2 or 3 big ones, I think, from what
I'm trying here. I will post it in the comments as well, because
that's more statistical stuff, things that are going on that way. But I mean, they're a great resource.
Yes, absolutely.
To reach out to as well. So Jessica, I thank you so much for sharing your journey with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And know that, Jessica can speak for this as well as I, that if you are a caregiver out there, you just know that you are not alone, in this space. And whether it is for your kiddo or a family member, your aging loved one, whoever it is, that caregiver journey has so many similarities to it. And know that at any point in time that you can, reach out to the On-Air Advocate here, and I will do my best to direct you to the right people that would be within your circle. And obviously Jessica has also given some really great resources to look into, which we will drop all of those below. So with that, thank you so much, Jessica. Definitely want to have you back on when we have a rare disease segment coming up in 2020. I can't believe it's going to be 2020. I can't believe it's going to be 2020. So we will revisit then, and any questions that anybody may have, just feel free to drop them in the comments below. So thanks again, Jessica, for spending the morning with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, if you guys want to know any more information about the On-Air Advocate, you can head on over to www.onairadvocate.com and find all of our resources and information there. Or you can head up to the top of this Facebook page, hit the blue button, and that will let you into our private community where many of us are in, that you can ask direct questions to at all times. All right, on that, happy Friday, everybody. Have a blessed weekend. Talk soon. Bye, Jessica. Thank you so much.
Bye.